Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Back to Basics session on biodiversity. This is just one of 5 of our workshops, so please feel free to go to www.issn.ie to check out the full lineup. So today we're taking a look at biodiversity. We are going to be exploring why it's important, how it's under threat, and why it's important that we all take collective action to preserve and protect it. Let's get started at the very beginning. So I want you to pair up with the person next to you and have a quick chat. Can you come up with a simple sentence that summarizes what biodiversity is? You've got 10 seconds to do this. Teacher, if you need more time, please feel free to press the pause button. Okay, let's take a look at what biodiversity is. So, put simply, biodiversity is all around us. It's all the living things on Earth, from the largest mammal to the smallest microscopic organism. And it includes all of the places they live. So, the jungle, the ocean, the forest, and our urban landscape. And we can't forget that we are part of the system too. So like anything, the more diversity there is, so the more variety there is, the healthier and better it is for the planet and for us. So biodiversity really is incredible. It is the ultimate giver. It underpins the whole of our economy and provides us with loads of our resources, the air that we breathe. It protects us from floods, from storms, from disease. And without it, to be honest, we would be in an awful lot of bother. Unfortunately, right now, we are living through the sixth mass extinction on Earth's history. What does this mean? Well, it means that we are experiencing rapid loss of species at an unprecedented rate. And this is driven by human activity, which we'll look a little bit at later. The problem is that we are out of balance. So it means that we are taking more and we aren't giving back. And that's really starting to catch up with us. So next, I want you to pair up with the person next to you, maybe choose somebody different this time. And I want you to have a quick chat about why is biodiversity important? So why do we need biodiversity and why actually should we care? Again, you've got 10 seconds. Okay, so let's take a little look at why biodiversity is important. So biodiversity provides us with healthy ecosystems. Different plants, different animals, different insects, they all play a really special role. So for example, bees, although they're tiny, they're mighty, and they help pollinate flowers, and they also help pollinate our food sources. They also, trees also give us oxygen, which of course is a really important thing, and they help us stay strong. Unfortunately, the National Biodiversity Data Centre recently reported that more than half of our bees here in Ireland have undergone a massive decline since the 1980s, and this isn't looking like it's getting any more positive anytime soon. And let's look at what that looks like. So actually a staggering 3/4 of the food we eat is pollinated by these little critters. And this could be the reality of our dinners. And this could be the reality of our picnics. As you can see, they're pretty bland and beige, and this is because we need pollinators to pollinate our food. And even dairy and meat will get a whack as well, because often our animals eat lots of pollinated grass like clover. So we really need to make sure that we're looking out for our bees. And again, we're going to discuss this a bit more later. So I'm not sure if you know, but actually lots of our medicine comes from nature. So we have aspirin, which comes from willow, the beautiful willow tree. We have penicillin, which comes from fungus. And we have morphine, which comes from poppies. So they're all kind of pain reliefs that we really rely on if we've got a headache or backache or if we're in hospital. Another really important thing, which sometimes gets overlooked, is that nature's not only pretty to look at, but it actually is so important for helping us to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So wetlands are carbon sinks. They literally draw the carbon out of the atmosphere and store it. And as you know, carbon is one of the main greenhouse gases that is causing our climate to warm up. So not only that, but our forests, as you know, absorb carbon as well, and they really can be helpful to prevent storms and floods. Tourism is also something that doesn't really get talked about. Where I live here in South Kerry, we have flocks of tourists that come to the Skellegs to see the puffins. Now, that tourism is highly relied on by our local community, and that's how they make their money and how they can buy their food. And people travel all over to see our unique climate. Biodiversity also plays a really important role in our physical and mental health. I know that when I'm stressed, I like to go out for a run in nature, I like to go hiking in the mountains, or I like to jump in the sea. I'm sure you're the same too. Some of you might like to go surfing, some of you might like to go hiking. So there's so much that we use nature for. Many Irish traditions and stories are also connected to nature. Our stories are how we connect to each other and to our land and to our ancestry. So when we look at the biodiversity crisis, this is so much more than us just losing a few plants and a few animals. The reality is so much more serious. We're losing our homes, we're losing our economy, we're losing our ability to support our well-being, we're losing our culture and our ability to tackle the climate crisis. It's a crisis that affects absolutely everybody and everything, and we really need to call for urgent action now. I was reflecting on this earlier and it really made me think about Adam and Eve. It's like we're stuck in this complex that we've been given this absolutely fantastic playground, and yet we just keep on taking without thinking of the consequences. And like I said before, that's catching up on us. Here in Ireland, we have been given an extremely unique and special set of biodiversity. It actually contributes 2.6 billion each year to the economy, and we have over 59 protected habitats. So what are habitats? They're basically homes. It's where these organisms live. So that could be woodlands, or it could be forests, or it could be wetlands. So we're going to take a little look. I want you to take a look at this woodlands picture and see if you can name any of the images you see in the photo. So you have 10 seconds. Actually, I'm going to give you 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. I wonder if you got any of those. So I would be interested to see if you can spot the difference between these two images. I want you to have a little bit of a chat in your class and tell me which one you think supports biodiversity more than the other one. So which one do you think supports a more biodiversity? I'm going to give you 10 seconds to talk about this. Again, teacher, if you need more time for this conversation, then please feel free to press pause. Okay, so this is a picture of a native broadleaf woodland. So thousands of years ago, Ireland was actually covered 80% of Ireland was covered in trees, and now it's just 2%. So we've lost a lot of our trees, which is a very important habitat for many of our animals and for different species. It's not often we see a broadleaf forest anymore, and these forests contain our native trees like oak and ash and willow and crabapple and spindle and beech and birch. But now what we're more familiar with and what we might think of when we talk about forests is this. This is a monoculture spruce forest. Actually, this one's in Wicklow. And these trees are Sitka spruce, which initially, when they first came to Ireland from Northwest America about 100 years ago, were considered a wonder tree. And that's because they grow really well in our climate, and they have high yield, which means they produce a lot of wood. And that timber is used for making pallets and also for making fences. So they create a lot of money by growing them and then cutting them down. But the problem is, if you've ever been in one of these forests, is they're a very dark, damp place. And that's because the pine needles drop on the floor and they create this carpet effect, which doesn't allow any light in. And the needles are acidic, which basically turns the soil into this area that's very species poor, and very, very little light reaches the floor, which means nothing grows. And of course, when they're cut down for timber, which is their purpose, it can leave the landscape looking scarred and take away the homes of wildlife. So my question to you is it better to plant spruce trees, even if they're not ideal, rather than planting none at all? So if you want to answer this question as a group or do a walking debate, teacher, just press pause. Okay, so wetlands are another really important habitat in Ireland. So, as you might know, the Irish climate is dominated by moist, warm air moving in from the Atlantic, and then this falls as rain, which causes lots of wetlands, and they come in different forms. So, we have the river, blanket bogs, freshwater, and spring fed temporary lakes, which are called furloughs, and they're really, really unique to Ireland. Here are some of the species that live there. Take 5 seconds to see if you can guess what any of these are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I wonder if you got any of those. Farmland. So as we know, agriculture is the backbone of our vibrant economy, and it really contributes hugely to our economic development. Farmland is characterised by lots of hedgerows and those beautiful stone walls that are surrounded by managed grass areas. And they are huge habitats for lots of our animals here. I wonder if you can guess any of these iconic animals. Okay, I wonder if you got any of those. We have lots of hares around here. I haven't seen a ladybird for a while though. So you've got 5 seconds to guess. What did these have in common? What did these 4 species have in common? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They're gone. All of these animals are extinct from Ireland. So we have the wolf, which was hunted to extinction in the 1700s, the mud pond snail, a rare mollusk, which due to its habitat being drained away is now completely gone, and the bear, which, can you believe it, once used to roam around Ireland, has now also gone extinct. We're unsure of exactly why that was. And then we have the great auk, which was a flightless bird, which of course, because it couldn't fly, was very vulnerable and went extinct as it was hunted for food. And this was in like 1844, I think. Now tell me, what do you think these species have in common? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So sadly, these are almost extinct. These are part of our Irish species that are on the red list. And in fact, 20% of our species that call Ireland home are threatened. And we're going to take a look at why later. This is a common thread across the world. And a recent report that was done by the Living Planet report by WWF said that 73% of our wildlife is decreasing in just 50 years. So that's a huge statistic, that we have lost or almost lost 73% of our wildlife populations in just 50 years. You can see here that in this graph that our nature is quite literally just disappearing. And again, this is seen in the IPBES Global Assessment, which has some pretty stark headlines. And the report shows that nature is declining at unprecedented rates. And this is going to impact us and the world we know. But the report does also stress that it's not too late to make a difference, but only if we start now and if we start at every level, from local to global. We're going to loop back around and talk about this a bit later on. So now I want you to pair and share and have a little talk about what is causing biodiversity. So biodiversity loss is a complex issue. There is not just one single cause. It's usually the result of a combination of different factors working together. So break into pairs and write down as many things that you can that is causing biodiversity loss. So teacher, I'll allow you to decide how long you want to do this task for. Just press pause and come back to us when you're ready. So one of the biggest things that is causing biodiversity loss is climate change. It's a major driver, and the two issues are extrinsically linked. As we experience extreme weather patterns from very cold to very hot, the animals and the species can't adapt to these new weather patterns. Habitat destruction. So one of the biggest threats to our wildlife and to our biodiversity is habitat loss. They're losing their homes. For example, when forests are cleared, and sometimes they use fires. I know here farmers use fire to clear all the gorse and clear land for farming, which happens once a year. Same as trees, when all the trees get cut down for wood and for logging and for timber. we are losing habitats. Same as when wetlands are drained to use bog as energy. This also destroys vital ecosystems that many species rely on. Agriculture and pollution is one that we can't ignore. Whether that's plastic or whether that's fertilizer used in farming, they have a devastating impact on wildlife. It contaminates water, harms animals, and disrupts our ecosystems. One of the last ones is overexploitation of resources. We are just taking too much and wasting an awful lot. So overfishing, illegal wildlife trade, and hunting have pushed many species to the brink of extinction. We are not being kind or considered when we take resources. We're taking more than we need and wasting more than we can afford. I'm not sure if anyone can guess what this is in the picture, but invasive species are huge for our biodiversity loss. So invasive species is something that's been introduced to an area from a different part of the world that's causing it's like a battling ground with our native systems, but they're a lot stronger and they take over. So this is the rhododendron. Another example is Japanese knotweed. And in the animal world, I'm not sure if you know, but our native red squirrel is and has been for a while massively declining. And a huge factor for this is the introduction of the grey squirrel, which is non-native to Ireland. So there are lots of reasons why our home is on fire, and we have so much at stake to lose. We definitely need strong policies and strong leadership, but we also need to start taking individual action too. And that starts with a community, and perhaps that community could be your class. The good news is that it's really not too late to start and to turn things back around. We really need to understand that decisions we make today are important, and we need to put pressure on our governments, on our CEOs, on our schools to make sure they are acting. We're going to take some time to look outside our window and focus on what we can do. Here is the next task. So I want you to reimagine your school grounds. So look outside the window or think of a place in your school that's maybe concreted and grey and not a lot going on. And I want you to reimagine this place as somewhere that biodiversity could thrive. Grab some art supplies, some pens, some pencils, and take some time to draw and doodle or paint, and really use your imagination and creativity to think outside the box and see how your school could transform an area into a biodiverse haven. Sorry, teacher, you're going to have to press pause while you do this activity and come back for the next few slides. We have gone through some pretty stark statistics of the reality of the biodiversity loss that we are experiencing, not only here in Ireland, but in the world globally. And I didn't want to shy away from that because I think it's important that we know the reality of our situation and the impact that has on us. But I think it's important also to focus on the fact that we are change makers. And one of my favourite quotes from Margaret Mead is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So I'd like to take a minute to go through some examples of how people can be a positive force in nature. We can absolutely make destruction and cause chaos, but we can really play a part in the regeneration and the recovery of nature. So here is a story of the corncrake. So almost half a century ago, this guy, the corncrake, was everywhere in Ireland. But then when farming practices changed and the grass and silage was cut a lot earlier, they had nowhere to nest. But now farmers have come together and they now have delayed their silage cutting to allow birds to nest in the meadows. And the birds are flourishing and they are now being seen in different parts of the country. We're going a little further fetch this time to Sri Lanka. So this is a picture of seemingly a big dumping ground in Colombo. There's lots of pollutants there, there's lots of rubbish there, there's absolutely no life thriving. And this space has been absolutely transformed into a biodiverse haven. This is now being restored into a wetlands, which is helping Colombo mitigate pollution and natural disaster. They have also increased their tourism and local economy because, of course, people want to go away to see wetlands, see the animals, see the exotic different plants and species. So this is a really good example of how the local community came together and transformed their dump into a thriving area where biodiversity could be supported and flourish, but also how the local economy could make money and also acts as a way to prevent from some of the serious flooding that they were experiencing. This moonscape is in Finland, and this is an area of a drained wetland. So a bioenergy company came in and digged up the peat underneath the wetland. So they drained all the water to dig the really energy-rich peat underneath. And for 2 decades, they mined this area, which absolutely scarred the landscape and left it as a dead zone. Local fishermen came together and transformed this place into a wetland and a really important carbon sink. So 1 year after the local fishermen did this, they saw 120 birds return. Now they have over 220 different species of birds return to this area where there was nothing, which I think is so empowering to see how a local group can turn something which is dead and total destruction into something living and thriving. This is something a bit closer to home that meet Killian. He is a solicitor and a zoologist who has invested his money into a mission to conserve Ireland's lost wildlife and ecosystems. He does this through creating a beautiful park called Wild Island, which is in Donegal, that I've been to myself. It's fantastic. And he rescues animals like bears and wolves that were once used to walk and roam freely around the country. And he is restoring the bog and the woodlands. And his mission is to really use these animals and his forestry and bogland to educate, conserve and rescue these animals. Look at that bear. So before we go into some solutions, let's wrap up with getting you to do a bit more work. Teacher, I would love if you could write biodiversity solutions in a big circle on the board and have a bit of a discussion around what can we do locally, what can we do globally in order to make change. You can draw on some of the examples we've done. You can draw on the work that you did in your reimagining your school grounds and have a little think and write down as many as possible blue sky thinking solutions that we have. And come back and I'll jump into some of my solutions. So there is a link between our lifestyle choices, so our choices that we make every day, and also the biodiversity crisis. So for example, if you and your family swapped just one meat meal every day to being vegetarian or being meatless, just one meal, your family could reduce land use by 10 tennis courts, could also save the emissions of over 9,000 kilometres driven. So that's from Spain to the North Pole, and cut water usage by the same amount as 630 showers. So this is just by not having one meat meal a week. Imagine if your whole school did this. Is this something you could bring into your school? Could you bring in Meat-Free Friday and have some delicious vegetarian food instead? I saw this on Instagram and I thought it was fantastic. So what if McDonald's and Burger King replaced the beef in their burger with a mix of beef and with soy protein? The amount of climate heating pollution saved would be equivalent to the annual emissions of Portugal, which is ginormous. It saves 50 million tons of planet heating pollutions a year, and it would free up an area as big as South Carolina. And we're not saying go without meat. It will still have meat in it, but it will just have other stuff in it, which would allow for there to be less carbon emissions. So this is a real example of how innovation and compromise can really help our biodiversity. Almost obvious one is buying local. Support your local economy, support your local farmer. It will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which of course is linked into our biodiversity. If you have a garden, if you have a school garden, if you have a park, if you have a garden in front of your house, the best thing you can do is leave it alone. So in May, don't mow the grass, and even more topical, in autumn, just leave the leaves alone. Don't blow them, don't rake them, do not put them into plastic bags, leave them there. It's a really important part of the ecosystem that creates healthy soil and also is home to wildlife to hibernate over the winter. Without unity, there is absolutely no strength. check for local volunteering groups, go and do a beach clean, join the Irish Wildlife Trust, go to Birdwatch Island, or get involved with some citizen science projects such as Explore Your Shore or Record Islands Biodiversity on their fantastic new app. Another thing you can do is contact your local councillor or TD and ask them, what are you doing and what is the biodiversity plan for my county or for your local region, your local area? You could also do this even more locally and ask your principal or green schools, hey, what's happening? Are we using pesticides? Are we mowing the lawns? Are we reducing our plastic waste? What is our school doing? And if your school doesn't have a green schools, or maybe if your school doesn't have a biodiversity action plan, now is the time to get one. Put together a group of teachers and students and start planning some fun sessions around how you can look at this through the lens of solutions. Get in contact with us at issn.ie and we can absolutely help you with this. There are already plenty of resources and plenty of people out there doing incredible things. This is an example of a pollinator plan. This is a ready-to-go DIY pack that experts have put together to help your school be more pollinator friendly. You can download this for free. Teachers, this is in your resource pack. It is time to talk. We do not want to have another 50 years go past and to end up with barely any biodiversity. As we have looked at through this workshop, we rely on biodiversity, not only because it's fantastic and beautiful and we want it to thrive, but also we are part of biodiversity. And for strong ecosystems, we need to be strong too, and vice versa. So use your voice and keep talking about it. If the ecosystem has taught us anything, it's small things really can make a pretty hefty difference. And last but not least, go outside, walk in the forest, swim in the sea, play in the woodlands, and be curious about the world around you. David Attenborough, who's one of my biggest heroes, said, no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will hopefully see you at one of the next Back to Basics workshops. Have a good evening or morning. Bye.